It was a bright Sunday afternoon on Maplewood Lane. The air smelled like grilled chicken, corn on the cob, and smoky BBQ sauce. Music played softly from a speaker on the porch. Kids laughed as they ran around the front yard. Angela Johnson placed drinks on the table while her husband Marcus flipped burgers by the grill. Their daughter Maya danced with her little cousins on the grass. It was the perfect family BBQ. Neighbors passed by and waved. Some smiled and said hello. Others just looked and kept walking, but the Johnsons didn't mind. They were new to this mostly white neighborhood. This was their second barbecue since moving in. They believed that kindness would open doors. Across the street, behind closed blinds, someone watched closely. Mr. Harold Bennett, early 60s, retired, lives alone. He watched the Johnson family's BBQ with a deep frown on his face. He didn't like noise, he didn't like crowds, and though he never said it out loud, he didn't like change. Inside his home, he picked up his phone and dialed a number he had called too many times before. 911. What's your emergency? The operator asked. Harold cleared his throat and spoke calmly, but with fake concern. Yes, there's a large group gathering outside. Loud music. I think they might be drinking. I'm not sure if it's safe, the operator asked. Are they violent or threatening anyone? Harold paused. Not yet, but they're loud and I don't recognize them. The operator sighed but logged the call. We'll send someone to check it out. Back at the BBQ, Marcus had just placed a juicy steak on a plate when Angela leaned over and whispered, Marcus, someone's watching again. He followed her gaze. The blinds across the street moved slightly just for a second. Marcus sighed. Ignore him. We're not doing anything wrong. Angela nodded, but her smile faded a little. She had seen that man watching them the last time too. Maya ran over, her face glowing with joy. Daddy, look at my dance. Marcus smiled wide and clapped. You're the queen of BBQ dancing. Laughter returned. For a moment, everything felt perfect again, until a police car slowly rolled up and stopped in front of their lawn. The music faded, the laughter paused. Every eye turned toward the flashing blue lights. Angela's heart raced. Maya stopped dancing. The cousins stood still, confused. Marcus wiped his hands nervously and walked toward the sidewalk. The officer stepped out of the car. A tall man, sunglasses, clean uniform, quiet steps. He didn't reach for his radio. He didn't shout. He just walked toward the family with a calm, unreadable face. Marcus stood tall, but respectful. Afternoon, officer. Is everything all right? The officer didn't answer immediately. He looked at the BBQ setup, the kids, the food, the happy family. Then he looked at Marcus. For a moment, no one spoke. The air was heavy with tension. Was he going to shut them down? Was someone getting arrested? Was this going to become another story? On the news. Then, suddenly, the officer took off his sunglasses and smiled. Smells good out here. You got enough for one more? Everyone froze. Angela's mouth opened slightly. Wait, what? The officer smiled wider. I had to come check out the complaint. But honestly, this is just a peaceful family cookout. And that grilled corn smells amazing. Marcus blinked. You're not shutting us down. The officer chuckled. Not unless you're hiding a fireworks show in the backyard. Laughter slowly returned. Angela let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Of course we have enough, she said, walking toward the table. What's your name, officer? The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a small badge, not his police badge but a personal one. He handed it to Marcus. It said, Detective Carl Henderson, Community Relations Unit. Marcus looked confused. Carl leaned in and whispered, let's just say, been where you are. He accepted a plate of food and joined the group near the grill. The kids started playing again. The cousins laughed. Music came back. Quietly. Carl took a bite and nodded. Now that's good chicken. But his eyes wandered toward the house across the street. He's called on families before, Carl said quietly. You're not the first, but you might be the last. Marcus looked surprised. You know about him. Carl nodded. Let's just say I've been tracking these kinds of calls for a while. He paused. This time I decided to come myself. Angela brought him a drink and said, well, we're glad you did. Carl looked around at the smiling family. This is what community should look like, he said. Joy, not fear. Across the street, Mr. Bennett stood behind his curtain, confused. Why was the officer laughing with them? Why didn't he stop them? Why did it feel like he had lost something? As the sun began to set, the barbecue continued. Neighbors who had stayed away started walking over, curious, friendly, and smiling. More kids joined Maya on the grass. Angela handed out drinks to people she had never met before, and Carl stood beside Marcus, watching it all. You're not just a homeowner, he said. You're a mirror. People see who they are when they look at you. Marcus nodded slowly. Then I hope they see something good. Carl smiled. I already did. That night, after everyone left, Marcus and Angela sat on the porch. The grill was off. The music had stopped. Maya was asleep inside. Marcus held the detective's card in his hand. Angela looked at him and asked, You think he came for more than just a complaint? Marcus nodded. He came because someone finally stood tall and refused to move. Because sometimes, a simple BBQ can reveal the truth about a street, and sometimes, the man in uniform isn't the one to fear. He's the one who comes to protect not just with law, but with understanding. The BBQ was over. The lawn was quiet. Plates were cleaned. Maya was asleep upstairs, still wearing her party dress. Marcus sat on the porch alone, staring at the small card in his hand. Detective Carl Henderson, Community Relations Unit. He kept replaying the moment in his mind. The police car, the tense silence, and then, the calm smile from the man in uniform. You're not the first, but you might be the last. What did he mean? Who exactly was this officer, and why did he come himself? Earlier that morning, the day had started with laughter. Angela was in the kitchen seasoning chicken. Maya helped her stir the lemonade. Marcus set up the grill in the yard, joking with his brother. Chris thought it was going to be a day of music, food, and family. I hope the neighbors are ready. Chris laughed. Marcus chuckled. If they're not, too bad. We're not hiding our joy anymore. Angela called out, let's keep it peaceful though. You know how people around here look at us. Marcus nodded. Peaceful but proud. At the same time, not far away, Detective Carl Henderson stood in front of a mirror, adjusting his tie. He checked his phone. One new alert from dispatch. Noise complaint. Maplewood Lane. Carl's eyes narrowed. Maplewood Lane. He remembered that street. He remembered the name Harold Bennett, and he remembered other complaints. One was a birthday party. Another, a group of kids playing soccer. Every time. The caller said, too loud, too many people. They don't look like they belong. Every time. It was a black family. Carl had a choice that morning. He could assign the call to another officer, or he could go himself. He looked at the address again. He made his choice. Back on Maplewood Lane, the BBQ began. Music played, kids ran, laughter echoed. Marcus looked around and smiled. This is home now. But just minutes later, that peace was interrupted by the slow crawl of a police car. Angela's smile faded. Oh no! Marcus stood up straight. Chris stepped beside him. Tense. The car stopped. The door opened. And Detective Carl Henderson stepped out. Everyone froze. The air got thick. Carl walked slowly, scanning the scene. His face was calm, unreadable. Maya hid behind her mom. Marcus stepped forward. Afternoon, officer? Carl didn't answer at first. He looked at the grill, the tables, the smiling faces now silent. And then he smiled and said, smells good out here. You got enough for one more. Back to the present. Now sitting on the porch, Marcus whispered to himself. He knew. He understood something. But what? Angela joined him with 2 cups of tea. He said we weren't the first, she reminded him. Marcus nodded. He also said we might be the last. Angela sat beside him. Do you think he's been through this before? Meanwhile, Detective Henderson sat in his car across town, parked outside a quiet building. He scrolled through his tablet, pulling up old 911 logs. There it was again. Harold Bennett, Maplewood Lane. Multiple noise complaints, almost always black or Hispanic families. None of the calls ever led to arrests. None were violent. None even involved illegal activity. Just people living, laughing, celebrating, existing. Carl thought back to his own childhood. He grew up in a neighborhood like this. He remembered his mom warning him not to play, his music too loud, not to wear a hoodie at night, not to stand out too much. We don't get second chances, Carl, she used to say. They see our skin before they see our hearts. Now, decades later, he was in a position to protect. To change what his younger self had been afraid of. The next morning, Marcus picked up the newspaper, and there, in a small section, was an opinion article, Too Many Calls, Not Enough Cause. Abuse of 911 in Quiet Neighborhoods, by Detective Carl Henderson. Marcus read every word carefully. The article didn't name names, but it was clear who the message was for. Carl wrote about how false calls hurt not just families, but the trust between police and the community. He wrote about how officers had to do better, and he ended with one line that gave Marcus goosebumps. Sometimes the loudest thing at a barbecue is not the music. It's the courage to be joyful in a world that wants you silent. Angela read over his shoulder. He wrote this. After yesterday, Detective Carl Henderson sat quietly in his car. The city moved around him, cars passing, people walking, children playing, but inside his head, there was only one street, Maplewood Lane. He had been there the day before, not as a stranger, not just as a cop, but as someone who had once been a little boy on a street like that, hoping the world would stop seeing his skin before it saw his smile. Carl stared at his badge. It used to make him proud now. It made him think, because behind that shiny symbol of power, he carried a secret, one he had never told his department, one he had buried deep, a secret that started with his own father. 30 years ago, Carl was just 10 years old when his father, David Henderson, was wrongly arrested during a neighborhood barbecue. It was supposed to be a fun Sunday. His father had just served food to guests when the police showed up, saying the music was too loud. Carl remembered the fear in his father's eyes, the confusion, the handcuffs, no shouting, no fighting, just silence and shame. Later, they released his dad with no charges, no apology. Carl remembered asking his mom, why did they take him? And she said, because some people don't need a reason, baby, just fear. That moment never left Carl. It became the reason he joined the police, to become the officer his father never got. Now, 3 decades later, history was repeating, except this time, Carl had the power to change the ending, and that's why he went to the BBQ on Maplewood Lane himself. Meanwhile, Marcus was at work, sitting in his small office at the community center. He couldn't stop thinking about Carl, the way the officer had shown up, the way he smiled, the way he understood everything without anyone saying a word. Marcus picked up Carl's card again. He texted, "Can we meet? I feel like there's more to your visit." Carl replied instantly, "Tomorrow, coffee, my treat." But next day they met at a quiet cafe near downtown. Carl was already sitting at a table in the back, wearing plain clothes this time. Marcus walked in and smiled. Detective Carl shook his hand. "Call me Carl today." They sat. Marcus wasted no time. "Why did you come personally?" Carl sipped his coffee and leaned back. "Because I knew what that call was. Before I even got in the car." Marcus nodded. "It wasn't about noise." Carl shook his head. "It was about control. Some people use the police like a weapon, to remind you that you don't belong." He paused. "But I wasn't going to be that weapon." Marcus sat quietly. Carl continued, "My father was arrested in front of me for the same thing you were doing, cooking, laughing, existing. They never apologized. So now, I try to apologize. With my actions." Marcus looked up. "That's why you stayed. That's why you smiled." Carl nodded. "You reminded me of him, strong, calm, dignified. I couldn't walk away and pretend it didn't matter." They sat in silence for a moment. 2 men, 2 fathers, 2 stories tied together by a badge, a memory, and a barbecue. Back on Maplewood Lane, things were shifting. Angela was watering the plants when Mrs. Peterson from 3 houses down stopped by. "Just want to say," she said nervously, "that I admire how your family handled the situation." Angela blinked. "Thank you," Mrs. Peterson continued. "I never said anything before, but I knew Mr. Bennett was calling the police on people. I should have spoken up." Angela smiled kindly. "You're speaking now. That matters." News of the BBQ was starting to spread, not from the police, not from the neighbor, but from the community. A young woman from the local blog wrote about it. A family was targeted, but instead of fear, they served food. Instead of anger, they stood proud. And instead of being quiet, they welcomed even the one in uniform. The article ended with, "Sometimes the real badge isn't the one you wear, it's the way you choose to show up." That line hit Carl hard when he read it. Because he knew it was true. That night, Carl drove back to Maplewood Lane. He didn't wear his uniform. He didn't come for work. He came to talk. Marcus was surprised to see him again. "Everything okay?" Carl smiled. "Just one more thing." He looked serious now. "I've started building a report about false calls, about repeat offenders, about how racism hides behind fake complaints. Your case will be the first official entry." Angela came to the door. "You're building a file." Carl nodded. "The department needs proof. I'm going to give it to them." Angela looked at Marcus. Then she said, "So you're fighting from the inside?" Carl replied quietly, "That's the only way to change the system." From where the silence starts, Marcus stepped forward. "Let us help." Carl smiled. "Then let's make sure no one else gets a badge pointed at their BBQ ever again." Across the street, Mr. Bennett peeked through his blinds again. This time, he didn't see fear. He saw something else. 2 black men, 1 a cop, 1 a father shaking hands, standing tall, unafraid, because behind every badge, there's a story, and behind every story, there's a choice. News didn't take long to spread at first. It was just a few neighbors whispering, then a blog post, then someone posted a short video online. Detective Carl smiling at the Johnson family's BBQ. The caption read, "Cop shows up to shut down a family BBQ, but stays for the food and the truth." Within 2 days, the video hit 10,000 views, and within a week, the world began watching Maplewood Lane. But not everyone was happy. Inside his house, Mr. Bennett paced nervously. He had been calling the police for years, and nothing had ever come from it. But this time was different. This time, people were talking, and some were listening. At the Johnson home, Marcus sat at the table with a folder open. Inside, printed articles, copies of complaints, photos from their barbecue. Carl had delivered them that morning. "This is real now," Marcus told Angela. "It's not just a story anymore. It's proof." Angela looked over his shoulder. "How many complaints has Bennett made?" Carl's voice echoed in their memory. "Over 16. Same style, same words, different families." Angela frowned. "And no one ever stopped him." Marcus shook his head. "Until now." Later that week, Carl stood before his department's internal review board. He laid everything out. The false 911 calls, the racial patterns, the silent damage done to innocent families. One senior officer leaned forward. "Detective, are you accusing a citizen of racism?" Carl didn't flinch. "I'm not accusing anyone. I'm showing you the facts. And the facts speak louder than excuses." Another officer asked, "Why did you go to that BBQ personally?" Carl looked straight at them. "Because someone had to." Meanwhile, at the Johnsons' home, Angela received a letter in the mail. No return address. She opened it slowly. Inside was a note, typed carefully. "You should have stayed quiet. This is our street." Angela felt a chill run down her spine. She showed it to Marcus. He read it twice, then calmly placed it in a plastic bag. We give this to Carl. That same evening, a group of neighbors came to the Johnsons' door. It wasn't a protest. It wasn't a threat. It was support. Mrs. Rodriguez from down the street spoke up first. We've seen too much silence. We want to help now. Another neighbor added, Mr. Bennett has been doing this for years. Everyone knew it, but we stayed quiet. Marcus looked at them with a soft but serious face. Then now is the time to speak. The next morning, 5 neighbors signed a formal statement. It confirmed that Mr. Bennett had made repeated calls, often after seeing families of color. One statement read, we thought he just didn't like noise. But now we know he didn't like people who didn't look like him. Carl delivered the file to the City Oversight Committee. Things were moving fast now. Meanwhile, the Johnsons received an invitation. You've been nominated for the Maplewood Community Courage Award. Angela was stunned. Marcus smiled. We didn't do anything special. Angela shook her head. No, we just didn't run away. On the day of the award event, Maya wore her favorite yellow dress. I'm going to walk with you, she told Marcus. He knelt beside her. You sure? She nodded. You always say we stand together, right? Marcus smiled. That's right, baby girl. Together. As they stepped onto the small stage at the park, applause filled the air. The mayor spoke first. We honor this family not just for surviving, but for standing, for showing us what quiet strength looks like. He handed Marcus the award. Angela held Maya's hand. But the true moment came when Marcus stepped forward to speak. He looked out at the crowd. I didn't want to be here because of something bad. I just wanted to grill some burgers with my family. I didn't want attention. I wanted peace. He paused. But sometimes, peace only comes when you speak. Not loud, not angry, but clear with facts. And with love. At the back of the crowd, someone stood alone in a hat and sunglasses. It was Carl. He didn't want to take attention away from the family, but he smiled as Marcus said, this award isn't just for us. It's for anyone who's been made to feel like a stranger in their own front yard. Later that night, Carl received an email. Subject, Internal Review Recommendation. Approved, the email said, due to new findings. Mr. Harold Bennett will be officially warned, fined, and entered into a 911 abuse watch list. Carl closed his laptop, leaned back, and whispered, truth always comes out. Back on Maplewood Lina, Johnson's hosted another small barbecue. Dustpan big. Just family and a few kind neighbors. Music played. Kids ran across the street. Mr. Bennett's house sat dark and quiet. Curtains drawn. No more watching, no more calling, just silence. Angela leaned on Marcus's shoulder. You think it's over? Marcus took a deep breath. The calls might stop, but the fight isn't over. Because there are still families out there who haven't had their BBQ yet. Angela looked at him. Confused? He smiled. Detective Carl Henderson sat at his desk. STARING, had a folder stamped confidential. Inside were papers about the 911 abuse report he had filed. It had triggered a wave of conversations in the department. Some officers supported him. Others didn't. Some called him brave. Others whispered behind his back. But Carl had made his choice. And now, that choice was bringing consequences. That morning, Carl was called to the captain's office. He walked down the hallway slowly. Not afraid, not angry, just steady. He knocked. Come in, said Captain Reese. Carl stepped inside. The captain was a serious woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice. Close the door. Carl. Carl sat. Captain Reese slid a paper across the table. I need to talk to you about the article. And the speech you gave. Carl nodded. Everything I said was true. The captain didn't argue. She said quietly, I believe you. But this department, it doesn't like attention, especially from its own. Carl waited. They're asking you to stop, she continued. No more public comments, no more press, no more involvement with the Johnson family. Carl's jaw tightened. You mean stay quiet? She nodded. Or it could affect your chances of promotion? Carl sat back. He had worked in this department for 15 years. He had earned every stripe, every shift, every sleepless night. But now they wanted silence. Not because he lied, but because he told the truth. He left the office with a heavy heart. Outside, he sat in his car and looked at a photo of his father in uniform. The man who never got justice. A man who taught him to be strong without becoming bitter. Carl whispered to the photo, what would you do? Then he smiled sadly. I already know. That evening, he drove to the Johnsons' home. Marcus opened the door and saw the tired look in Carl's eyes. Everything okay? Carl didn't answer at first. Then he said, they gave me a choice. Stay silent and rise higher, or speak up and fall alone. Angela stepped outside too. Are you going to stop? Carl looked them in the eye. No, because I didn't start this to save my badge. I started this to honor my father and protect your daughter. The next morning, Carl emailed the city newspaper. He requested to write a public letter, titled it, Why Silence is No Longer Safe. In the letter, he wrote, when I wore this badge, I swore to protect people. Not protect comfort, not protect lies, but people. When a child sees a police car, she should feel safer, not Scared. When I stood at the Johnsons' BBQ, I remembered my own father arrested for doing nothing but feeding his friends. That's why I will not be silent. The letter went viral. The headline appeared on local news stations. Other officers, younger ones, started sending messages of support. Carl's inbox was full. Thank you for saying what we couldn't. You're not alone. We're proud to wear the same badge. But not everyone was cheering. Carl received threats, too. Anonymous messages like, you chose the wrong side. You'll regret this. Still, Carl stood firm. If telling the truth brings enemies, I must be saying something worth hearing. At the same time, Marcus and Angela were preparing for another community barbecue. This time, it wasn't just family. They invited everyone: black, white, Hispanic, Asian, every neighbor. Every friend on Maya made signs that said, Unity BBQ all. Are welcome. Even neighbors who had never spoken to them showed up. The Johnsons' lawn was full of smiles. Chairs, music, and plates of food. No fear, no whispers, just community. Carl arrived late. He wore his uniform not to enforce but to stand with them. Maya ran up and hugged him. You came back. Carl smiled. Of course. I heard you made the best lemonade in town. Angela handed him a glass. You'll stay for the speeches, right? Carl laughed. I wasn't told there'd be speeches. Marcus grinned. You're making one. The sun began to set. Marcus took the small mic and cleared his throat. Neighbors stood around. Waiting, he looked at Carl, then at the crowd. We're here because one man chose not to walk away. He didn't turn his back. He didn't ignore the truth. He stood in uniform, and stood with us. He turned to Carl, Detective Henderson. This mic is yours. Carl stepped up. He looked out at the people, the faces, the children. He felt the weight of his badge. Then he spoke. I was told to stay quiet. I was told to protect my career. I was told to back away. But how can I do that when a little girl asks me, are we safe now? And I don't have an honest answer, so no, I won't be silent. Because I'd rather lose my title than lose my soul. The crowd applauded. Angela wiped her eyes. Maya clapped hard. And for the first time, even Mrs. Peterson, who had once crossed the street to avoid them, stood beside them with tears in her eyes. That night, as the stars came out, Carl sat on the porch beside Marcus. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to, because both knew the real choice wasn't about promotion, it was about people. And Carl had chosen right. Summer was in full swing on Maplewood Lane. Children played on the sidewalks, birds chirped early in the morning, and the Johnsons' home, once a place of tension, had become a symbol of unity. But not everyone was happy about it. Across the street, Mr. Harold Bennett sat behind his curtains, watching. He had watched the BBQ, watched the laughter, watched Detective Carl Henderson return in uniform and be celebrated, and inside him, something began to burn. Not guilt, not regret, but bitterness. One morning, Marcus stepped out to get the mail and saw something strange. A folded letter on his porch, not in an envelope. He picked it up slowly and read, Your time here is temporary. This street doesn't forget. No name, no signature. Just a warning. Angela read it and clenched her jaw. I know it's him. Marcus nodded. He's not hiding it anymore. They called Carl. Within the hour, he arrived and picked up the note with gloves. We'll check the handwriting. But it's not just about paper anymore, Carl said seriously. Angela asked. What do you mean? Carl looked at them both. He's getting bold. Because he's losing control. That evening, the story hit the local news. Family who faced false 911 call now receives threat. The headline said. And the media showed up again. Reporters stood on the Johnsons' lawn, asking questions. Angela kept Maya inside. Marcus answered calmly. We're not afraid, but we are aware. Hate doesn't disappear when you expose it. Tit often gets louder before it dies. The next day, a lawyer knocked on their door. Marcus opened it, surprised. Can I help you? The man introduced himself. I represent Mr. Harold Bennett. He's filing a lawsuit against your family. Angela stepped forward. What? For what? Emotional distress, the lawyer replied. He claims your family's actions, especially the media attention, have made it unsafe for him in his own home. Marcus couldn't believe it. He called the cops on us. He threatened us, and now we're the problem. The lawyer only said you've been served, and left. Carl met them that night in their living room. He read the papers and sighed. This is his last move. When racists lose power, they reach for anything that makes them feel in control again. Angela looked tired. We don't have money for court battles. Marcus nodded. And we don't want more cameras at our door. Carl placed his badge on the table. Then let me take care of this from inside. Angela frowned. But won't that risk your job? Carl looked at her. I already made my choice. I'm not backing down now. At the department, Carl met with the legal team and the city council. He presented all evidence. The complaint records, the anonymous threat, the community support letters, the signed neighbors' statements, and, finally, the letter from the porch. If this family is being sued for defending their right to exist peacefully, Carl said, then this city has failed them twice. In court, Carl was called as a witness. He walked into the courtroom in full uniform. Bennett sat across the room, pale and silent. Carl told the judge. I responded to the original call. There was no crime, no violence, Just a family BBQ. The only thing Mr. Bennett feared was the sound of joy from a family that didn't look like his. The courtroom was silent, then the judge spoke. Mr. Bennett, this court finds your lawsuit not only baseless, but harmful to public peace. You have abused emergency services and used legal action to intimidate your neighbors. She slammed the gavel. Case dismissed. Cheers didn't break out. There was no applause, just relief. Angela exhaled. Marcus squeezed her hand. Carl walked out, quietly, badge heavy on his chest. Heart full of quiet pride. But the storm wasn't fully over. The next weekend, the Johnsons held another BBQ, this time, not as a celebration but as a message. We're not going anywhere, Marcus said. People came in larger numbers, more neighbors, even people from other towns showed up. A local news van parked nearby, but this time, they didn't ask for interviews. They just observed what peace looked like when protected. Carl showed up with officers from surrounding precincts off duty, dressed casually. He whispered to Marcus, they came to support. You've started something bigger than this street. Then, something unexpected happened. A teenage boy, tall, light-skinned, nervous, approached the grill. I'm sorry to bother you, he said. Angela turned around. Not at all. You okay? He hesitated. I live 2 streets down. I just wanted to say, thank you. I'm mixed. My dad's white. My mom's black. And I didn't know who to look up to, until I saw you. Marcus put down his tongs and smiled gently. You look up to yourself, son. But if you need someone walking ahead of you, we're here. Angela handed the boy a plate of food. Maya gave him a cupcake. And just like that, a new bond was formed. Back across the street, Mr. Bennett's house sat empty. A for sale sign had gone up that morning. No one came out. No one said good. The BBQ was over. Plates were empty. Chairs stacked. The yard quiet again. But inside Marcus Johnson's mind, things were far from calm. Even though they had won the court case. Even though the street was finally peaceful, Marcus felt something inside him slipping. Not fear, not anger, but exhaustion. He sat on the porch late into the night, staring into the dark sky. Angela joined him quietly. You didn't eat much, she said. I wasn't hungry. You didn't laugh with the guests. I didn't feel like it. Angela didn't push. She just sat beside him, her hand on his knee. After a few minutes, Marcus spoke. I feel like we fought a war, but I'm the only one still bleeding. Angela looked at him. You held this family together. He looked down. But who's holding me? The next morning, Marcus walked Maya to school. She skipped along happily, telling him about art class and cupcakes. But Marcus wasn't really listening. He was looking around at the neighbors, the street signs, the sidewalks. All of it familiar. All of it had changed. And yet, he still felt like a stranger. At the school gate, Maya gave him a tight hug. I love you, Daddy. Marcus knelt down and kissed her forehead. I love you more. She ran inside. And for the first time since this all started, Marcus cried just one tear, but it carried the weight of every moment. He stayed strong when he wanted to break. That same afternoon, Carl called him. Mind if I drop by? Marcus agreed. When Carl arrived, he could sense something was different. You okay? He asked. Marcus gave a small smile. Define okay? Carl sat beside him, both of them silent for a moment. Then Carl spoke. You know, I once tried to quit the force. Marcus looked up, surprised. Why? Carl shrugged. The weight, the pressure, the silence. All of it became too much. I had no one to talk to, no one who understood. He looked at Marcus. Until I met someone who said, the reason you feel heavy is because you're carrying more than just yourself? Marcus nodded slowly. That's exactly how it feels. Angela came out with 2 cups of tea. You both look like soldiers. After battle, she joked. Carl smiled. That's not far off. Marcus asked him, how do you keep going? Carl took a deep breath. Because every time I think of quitting, I think of the next family who might not have a voice. If I give up, who stands for them? Marcus looked at the ground. But what if I can't stand anymore? Angela gently touched his shoulder. Then let us carry you. For once, that evening, Marcus opened a journal he hadn't touched in years. He wrote one sentence. Being strong doesn't mean never breaking. It means healing out loud. Meanwhile, back at the department, Carl faced his own test. A new officer, young, confident, had mocked his letter to the press during training. We're not therapists, we're cops, he had said. Carl didn't argue. He just said, come with me. He took the rookie to a local community center. There a group of teenagers, black, Latino, Asian, were sharing their experiences with police. Carl listened. The young officer watched. One boy stood up and said, the day Carl came to our BBQ, we saw a cop who didn't scare us. That's the first time I believed maybe not all uniforms are dangerous. The rookie had no words. Afterward, Carl turned to him. We don't need to be perfect, but we must be present. That's how trust begins. The young man nodded. I had no idea. Carl replied, most of us don't, until we choose to see. Back on Maplewood Lane, Marcus decided to do something unexpected. He returned to the school this time, to speak to the class. Maya's teacher invited him to share about standing up for what's right. He stood in front of 20 wide-eyed kids, and said, sometimes, Doing the right thing feels like standing on the edge of a cliff. It's scary, it's lonely, but it's also the moment when you discover that wings are built in silence. Later that week, a young father from a nearby block knocked on Marcus's door. He had heard about the BBQ'd, the threats, the court case. He said nervously, "I've been afraid to bring my family outside. We're new here. I didn't think we belonged." Marcus invited him in. He gave him lemonade, and hope. "We all belong, but sometimes someone has to go first." To prove it, Angela looked at Marcus that night and smiled. "You're getting your strength back." He nodded, slowly. "But I am." Then he said something she hadn't heard in a while. "Let's plan the next community event." Angela raised an eyebrow. "Another BBQ," Marcus chuckled. "No, a movie night, something calm." Angela laughed. "As long as it's not about cops and bad guys." They both laughed together for the first time in weeks, because even when you're one step from the edge, sometimes all it takes is a hand, a word, a moment, to pull you back into the light. 6 months had passed since that first BBQ, 6 months since the police car showed up, since fear entered their yard, since a neighbor tried to silence their joy. But now, Maplewood Lane was no longer the same. It started with small changes. A smile from an old neighbor who used to avoid eye contact, a wave from a child across the street, a new black family moving in without fear. Then came the big changes. The local news ran a story titled, "The Street That Chose Courage Over Silence." And in City Hall, new policies were discussed. Stricter rules on false 911 calls, community meetings, led by officers, more training in empathy and understanding of it, began on this street. One bright Saturday morning, the Johnsons were setting up chairs again. Not for a BBQ, not for a protest, but for something new, a block celebration. The theme, Voices Together. Angela baked cupcakes. Marcus prepared his famous lemonade. Maya made a sign with markers. "Thank you, Detective Carl." Carl arrived wearing jeans and a plain shirt, no badge in sight. But when he stepped onto the street, people turned to him with smiles and applause. He shook hands, took photos, and hugged Maya, who ran straight to him. "You came," he laughed. "You think I'd miss this?" Angela walked up. "You're part of this family now." Carl looked at Marcus and smiled. "Thank you for letting me stand with you," Marcus replied. "You didn't just stand with us, you helped us rise." Later that afternoon, a small stage was set up in the center of the block. The mayor stepped up with a microphone. 6 months ago, this street made history not because of a crime, but because of kindness. One family stood strong, one officer stood with them, and a whole city started listening. Then she handed Marcus a plaque, in honor of the Johnson family for bravery, unity, and never giving up. Applause filled the street. Angela held back tears. Maya held the plaque in her tiny hands. But then, the mayor paused and said, "There's one more surprise." She turned to Carl. Detective Carl Henderson stepped forward. Carl looked confused, then stood. "Your actions changed this department's heart, and we're proud to announce you've been promoted to Captain of Community Relations, the first of its kind in our city." Cheers erupted. Carl stood in shock, tears forming in his eyes. Angela whispered, "You deserve it," Marcus said. "Now you can change more than a street. You can change the system." That night, after the music faded and the people left, Marcus and Angela sat quietly on their porch again. Maya was asleep inside, still holding the plaque in her arms. The stars twinkled above them. Angela broke the silence. "Do you believe all this really started because of a barbecue?" Marcus smiled. "No, it started because we didn't sit down when they told us to." Angela leaned her head on his shoulder. "It started because we believed our joy was worth protecting." A few houses down, a new family was moving in. A mother, father, and 2 little boys. They looked around nervously as they carried boxers to the porch. Marcus stood up, crossed the street, and offered his hand. "Welcome to Maplewood Lane." The father shook it, surprised. "Thank you. We weren't sure what to expect." Marcus smiled warmly. "You can expect neighbors who stand together. That's all you need to know." Later, Carl drove home. With the window down, the wind hit his face. But his mind was full of memories. Of his father, of that first visit, of Maya's hug, of standing on that porch and choosing to speak. He whispered to himself, "We didn't just protect one family. We helped others find their voice." And then he smiled. That street didn't just change me. It changed everything. Epilogue. 1 year later, Maplewood Lane is peaceful, colorful, united. Families of all kinds walk freely. No more false calls, no more silence. Carl now leads a citywide program teaching young officers how to serve with empathy. Marcus is speaking at schools, teaching kids about strength, family, and standing tall. Angela has started a blog, The Porch That Spoke Back. And Maya, she wrote an essay in class called, "My Daddy is My Hero." And so is the man with the badge, because in the end, it wasn't about noise, it wasn't about race, it was about truth, about people who stood tall when it would have been easier to sit down, and about one street that changed everything.